If you're not a little teary-eyed after that, you're a stronger person than me. I'm a little teary-eyed now. And this is my life's work. Like, no part of that was new to me. So hi, I'm Amanda. If you haven't met me before, those are my two littles. And I'm an immigration attorney. We acknowledge every Sunday that we are on the land of the Takesta, the Miccosukee, the Seminole peoples, which is an implied way of acknowledging that we are all of immigrant descent, unless you happen to be of descent of a First Nations person, which I am not. My people came the right way. My ancestors caught the free cruise from Africa, the coffin ship from Ireland, and a coolie ship from China. Nobody could accuse any of us of being undocumented or illegal, although 2/3 didn't have citizenship rights for quite some time. That is a story of American immigration. If you came before basically the 1880s, you came the right way. The laws were either non-existent or incredibly flexible. The very first immigration law said that if you were free and white, within 2 years you were a citizen, so long as you weren't a traitor. A few years after that, the law was very easy. It was 14 years to become a citizen. That was it. Free, white, 14 years, boom, citizen. No residency, nothing. No screening when you came in. In fact, we didn't actually have screening or targeted laws until the 1882, in which time we started targeting by race with the Chinese Exclusion Act. It would be the Chinese Exclusion Act, if you're not familiar with it, specifically said that if you were Chinese, there were limitations on what you could do once you got here. So please come and build our railroads. Please come and service us in our cities with restaurants and laundromats, but you can't stay. And your children can't stay. It would be 60 years before a person of Chinese descent could actually be a citizen in the US. At the same time that one population was intentionally excluded, other migrants were subject to a very simple process. If you were not a convict, a lunatic, an idiot, or a person unable to take care of himself without becoming a public charge, you got in. That was it. It was an uncomfortable screening. If anybody's ever been to Ellis Island and seen the shoe horns that they use to check you for disease and whatnot, it was uncomfortable, but it was a few hours. And the worst case scenario, if you were sick, was that you got held in a facility in quarantine until you were better, and then boom, you were allowed in. That's what it took to be legal. Racism was built into the immigration code, though. By 1924, the government set a quota, the Johnson-Reed Act, if anybody ever quizzes you on this, that set visa numbers at 2% of the US population by nationality in 1890. Why, in 1924, when we had other censuses, would we set it back to 1890? Because in 1890, we had a lower population of Southern Europeans, Middle Easterners, African, Asian. So by setting the population back there, we could limit by nationality who was allowed to come legally. The law that we have now is called the Immigration and Nationality Act, and it's born from this racist history. The reason that modern migrants are not able to come, quote, the right way, is a combination of history, political will, and fear. There are two main ways to migrate lawfully, employment-based and family-based. And if you are able to travel lawfully, you get to apply for a visa, go to an interview, close down your bank account, sell your apartment, sell your car, maybe ship some furniture, show up with a flight where you get to watch 2 or 3 movies, eat a pizza, come on in, right? That is not what most people are getting to do now. Because to get one of those visas, you have to have a specific skill set, more than likely speak English, have an education list, an employer who sponsors you. It's complicated. I live on Miami Beach, and the people who run the restaurants run the business visa racket, and I will tell you that getting one of those business visas to come is complicated. So most people go with family. But to come with family, you actually have to have family already here. You have to not only have family in the United States, you have to wait for a visa. If you could put up the visa slide. Sorry, Steve. Visa slide. There's this thing called the visa bulletin, and I don't mean to be too technical, but it actually tells how many people can come and when their priority date was. It's super complicated, but basically you have to have a parent or a spouse or a child who's a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident. You have to qualify to support yourself, which for most people means speaking English and having an advanced education, which I don't know if you've been to school in Guatemala lately, but not a lot of university graduates. And then you have to wait. You have to wait. For some people, the wait list is over 20 years long. If you are from China, India, Mexico, or the Philippines, you are going to wait over 20 years to come with a visa lawfully. So if you're living your life, you have a career, your friends, your job, you can wait 20 years. Doesn't matter, right? You can come the right way. But if you are living in any one of those red countries, shades of red, you may not have time to wait. If you are like the refugees in the song that we just heard, life is going along and then suddenly there is no safety. There is a cartel, there is a gang, there is a civil conflict, there is a religious sect that has come into your town and made it impossible to live, and you are no longer safe. At that point, you don't have the time to go online, find an application in a language you don't speak, get yourself in line for a visa. You're going to have to flee. And the way that people flee is complicated. I said fleeing isn't easy in my script, but I changed my term. Can you switch it? Thank you. So if you are coming from a connected country, South America, Central America, you're in the good boat because you're going to be able to walk or take a train. If you are coming from Africa, the Middle East, Central Asia, or Asia, you're going to have to find some way to get a fake visa, maybe even a fake passport, and then get on an airplane. A good chunk of my clients come from Angola and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And one of the ways that they do it is that they wait until the plane is full, and after they've paid several bribes, they're able to get on the last of the plane and sit where the flight attendants sit. It's very complicated. It takes a lot of bribes, connections, and luck just to get on the plane, let alone for the plane to take off. Once you arrive, the common locations are Brazil and Ecuador. That's when you get your bus, your train, your smuggler, or you walk. You walk through jungles, you ride on the top of a train. If you're lucky, you get slammed in the back of a cargo truck and you get to drive through. And at every border point, you have to risk being charged another bribe, possibly being taken off and disappearing, maybe being turned around. That's just to get to the border. When I was looking at Google Maps this morning, I tried to search from Quito, Ecuador, which is a common flight destination. It's really easy to get a visa, or some countries don't even need visas to fly into Ecuador. Google Maps could not tell me how many miles it was to walk from Quito to McAllen, Texas, but I will tell you, I know dozens of people who have done it. From San Salvador, El Salvador, to the border crossing in McAllen, Texas, the shortest walking distance is 2,146 kilometers. Do that with a baby on your back. Do that with a baby and another small child. That's how people are coming. During this journey, you're going to face human smugglers who are going to charge you thousands, and they might disappear after taking your money. There's no guarantee. There is no money-back guarantee. They may separate you from your children or your spouse. They may threaten you. They will threaten you. I'm not going to lie. I don't think I've met anybody who had a nice smuggler. Although I have heard that some of them had good manners. They're going to threaten you. They're going to physically abuse you. They're going to separate you from your relatives. And if you're lucky, they're not going to sell you to a cartel. Human smuggling has become more lucrative than drug smuggling or weapons smuggling at this point, because you can sell the person again and again and again. Beyond smuggling, you can reach human trafficking, which is what my firm actually specializes in. Smuggling is just crossing the border illegally for a fee. Trafficking is when somebody is recruited by force or fraud, usually fraud. Hey, it's going to be easy, it's going to be fast, I got the best service, don't you worry about me, trust me. Recruiting by fraud and then obtaining and transporting by force or coercion. Coercion is threat of harm when you don't actually harm the person. And then during the journey, you're using them for labor. With children in the audience, I won't go into the commercial sex version, but labor is when you say, hey, as we walk this desert for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 nights, you're going to carry this 50-pound backpack, and I'm not going to let you look what's inside. But trust me, if the backpack gets lost, you get lost. It's getting to the stash house and being turned into the house servant. And it doesn't matter if you paid for this service. It does not matter what you were promised because you don't have a visa, so you are at the mercy of another person. That's the inside of a stash house in El Paso, Texas. When migrants give up their free will, all their belongings, they do it with a single hope that they just make it across the border. Within that border region, you've got the desert, you've got rivers, and you've got stash houses. The stash houses that have been busted by Customs and Border Patrol, they like to do press releases so we get to see images of them. They can house upwards to 150 people. The stash house you saw earlier had 64 people in it and a lot of narcotics. That was in El Paso, Texas, July 2021. These stash houses are trailers, warehouses, sheds in somebody's backyard, and they're houses in suburbs. I think about once a month we see a press release with a house in a suburban division that is actually being used as a stash house. It looks beautiful from the outside. One of my favorite stash houses has a mailbox shaped like a school bus. I never would have thought that that was a stash house. But these places are used to maximize human capacity. So as you can imagine from that picture of the inside of a house, they're not clean. They are not clean. One of my most common comments is, you will never believe the smell of all these people together. You're not fed in those stash houses. In fact, a lot of times the coyotes, that's what they call them, polleritos, polleros, is the new term, but coyotes is the common term. The common term is the coyotes that bring you across, but now there are so many people that they're calling them herding chickens. So if you herd chickens, my Spanish is not great. You're a chicken herder. Sorry, I don't know the word. It's like pollerito, something like that. My Spanish is limited to asylum and human trafficking, so I've got like all the words for battering and abusing and assaulting somebody, but not so much for ordering dinner. So it's not useful Spanish. But at any rate, within 100 miles of the US border, you have to get through Customs and Border Patrol. So it's not enough to just cross the border. You have to make it past that 100-mile mark. So it can take weeks, sometimes even months, just to make it into the United States. But to what end? Once you're in the United States, there's actually not much for you. Oh, that was the first one. That was the visas. Sorry. To just go back in time. Visas. Oh, that's the stash house. I'm sorry. I was not well organized for this conversation, but that's the stash house with 64 men that was raided in July 2021. Once you come to the United States, assuming you made it through, now you have to figure out, how do I get to stay? I love that children's book. I really love that children's book, but I can't stand the last page, which is, yes, we get to stay. No, you don't, my dearest. If you make it through, you have to figure out a lawful way to stay. Our system is built so that there's family-based immigration and employment-based immigration, and then humanitarian, which is the space that I mostly work in. If you did not come with a lawful entry, family immigration is almost completely closed to you. It doesn't matter if you have a U.S. citizen parent. It doesn't matter if your children are U.S. citizens. It doesn't matter how long you've been here. If you didn't have a lawful entry, you came and had a visa, you were inspected and admitted through, there's just nothing that's going to happen for you. And that's a common misconception. I hear it all the time, but I married an American. I'm a citizen now, right? No, boo-boo. No, it doesn't work that way. Marrying a U.S. citizen does not help you unless, ironically enough, they abuse you. If they abuse you, you may qualify to stay in the United States under the Violence Against Women Act. May, not necessarily. You still need a lawful entry if you have more than two. There's the asylum program. Asylum is what most people are familiar with, and that's what most of the people coming on Florida shores right now are seeking. It's what most of the people coming through the southern border along Arizona, Mexico, Texas, California. Unfortunately, asylum is a lot harder than just having a bad life. It breaks my heart every time I have to tell somebody, I'm really sorry bad things happened to you, but this doesn't actually qualify for asylum. The asylum program is relatively new. We didn't actually have it when Jewish refugees were trying to reach the United States. We turned away dozens of ships from Europe during World War II because we didn't have such a thing as asylum. And now we're doing the exact same thing because we have asylum and we don't want to use it. To qualify for asylum, you have to show that your government or someone your government cannot protect you from has hurt you in the past or is willing to hurt you in the future, is likely to hurt you. That hurt had to be persecution. It couldn't just be a one-off beating. You have to show that the reason that they hurt you is one of the, quote, protected grounds. Religion, race, gender is not one of the protected grounds. Particular social group is the most common. It's the catch-all because most people don't actually have a race or religion problem. And then once you've shown that you've been persecuted, once you've shown that they did it because of that reason, you actually have to show that there's no place in your country you could be safe. No single location. If you are from Mexico, Mexico is a huge country. There are vacation destinations. There are cities where no one knows you. It is really, really hard to show that there is nowhere in Mexico that you can go where this person won't find you. Same with Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela. Just about every country that has more than one major city, it's going to be tough to show that there's nowhere you can go and be safe. In addition to making that argument, it's going to come down to two things: your location in the United States and whether or not you can afford an attorney. I will point out that immigration attorneys on the whole are some of the lowest paid in America, probably because we all have bleeding hearts. But still, you do have to pay for an immigration attorney for the most part, and that's just something that is out of reach for most people. So if you cannot afford an immigration attorney who understands the laws and knows how to frame your testimony in a way that you can actually meet the legal requirements, you're not going to win. The fiscal year 2017 stat was that 90% of unrepresented asylum seekers lost their case in fiscal year 2017. That same year, only about half with an attorney actually won their case. And if you looked at the stats, there's so much data out there. I wanted to fill this presentation with data, and then I realized you guys probably don't want to look at numbers on a Sunday. But it depends on which court you're at. There are judges who have a 90% denial rate and ones who have an 87% grant rate. So you're playing the game of where can I put my case so I can actually have a shot at being granted? Where can I put my case where my claim actually has a legal basis? Because if you are in the First Circuit and the Fourth Circuit, First Circuit is like Boston Immigration Court, Fourth Circuit is Arlington, Virginia, DC area. If you are in those two circuits, you can argue that I am a victim of domestic violence and my country does not support women fleeing domestic violence. I deserve asylum. If you are in the Fifth Circuit, which is Texas, that doesn't fly. No, it's not going to work. It's not going to happen. Same with gang-based asylum claims. If you are saying that MS-13 has come to my town, they're recruiting people my age, they have threatened me and exploited my mom's store, extorted, excuse me, that's not going to get you anywhere in Texas. It's not going to fly in Oklahoma. It's not going to fly in Chicago. It's not going to fly in California in 2 out of the 3 courts. But it will win in Arlington. So you have to be savvy enough to know, oh, I need to move to Arlington just to have a shot at winning through asylum. So a few months ago, we had the busing situation. Anybody raise your hand if you heard about busing migrants? May I ask how many of you were appalled by that? You were appalled? Were you heartbroken? I cheered. I was so freaking glad. I was like, get these people out of Texas. Get them out of Florida because they don't have a shot at winning in Texas. If you want to give them a free ride to Boston, heck yeah, because in Boston their claim has a shot. And I'm sorry that they're separated from their relatives, but I want them to stay and live more than I want them to lose and have 2 or 3 years with a relative in Texas and have to go through that journey again. Because I promise you, if you can't live in your home country, you will try to come back. So playing the game of location, having the luck of having an attorney you can afford, having an attorney who actually does their job. One of my specialties was appeals. I cannot tell you how many times I have had a client come through the door who spent $15,000 on an asylum attorney who did nothing. I can't tell you how many times I saw fraudulent asylum applications filed because people went to notarios. Anybody heard the term notario? She's heard it in the back. A notario is like the literal translation is a notary. In other countries, a notario is like an attorney. So people are like, oh, I'm in America, notario, you're an attorney. You can do my application. This works. This makes sense. It's not the same, right? And notario fraud is incredibly common. And people who have very valid applications go to notarios, have fraudulent information put on there, can't read it, sign it, and they are banned for life because they have filed a fraudulent application. It is so hard to undo that knot. It is really, really difficult. So you've got the option of asylum, but that's not going to work for people. There's also La Ley de 10 años, which if anybody has an undocumented friend, you may have heard of the 10-year law. Anybody? Anybody ever heard of it? You need more undocumented friends. Oh my goodness. Get to know your neighbors. So if you've been in the United States for more than 10 years and you have a US citizen or resident, spouse, child, or parent who is going to face, I love this phrase, exceptional and extremely unusual hardship, you might be eligible for residency, maybe. And by exceptional and extremely unusual hardship, you need like a child with cerebral palsy. You need, you need a kid with cancer. I'm not going to lie, I've sent kids back to their school and said, can you get an IEP? I think this kid is a little slow. Can we please get an individualized education plan? Because if there's nothing wrong with this kid, if they're absolutely perfectly fine, I got nothing to keep their parents here when they got picked up at their work site while the child was at school. There's U visas if you've been a victim of crime. Everybody hears about that. They're excited about that. It takes more than 10 years to get, and it's really, really narrow what kinds of crimes. And then human trafficking visas, which is what my firm specializes in, which, again, there's littles. I'm not going to get into what human trafficking is. But basically, to stay in the United States after you've come without a visa, you have to suffer. You have to put your life through the ringer. And then you have to have a whole bunch of good luck, good resources, and a fair adjudicator, the judge or your USCIS officer. I'm sorry, my kids cannot sit still. They just cannot. I got a bag full of goodies, and they are just... but that's okay, because they have freedom in this country, right? So you have to suffer, basically. That's what it takes to come the right way. We've had programs through the last 20 years to try to fix this, 30 if you count temporary protected status. They're stopgap measures. We've got DACA, we've got temporary protected status, we have some of the advanced paroles for specific situations like what we have in Ukraine right now. These are all stopgap Band-Aid programs that are not going to fix the problem. We have politicians who keep promising that they're going to do something for, quote, the dreamers. And as much as I love the dreamers, it's actually keeping out millions of more people who just don't meet the dreamer qualification. Most of the proposed plans require you to have a relative. So if you are a single person who never decided to get married or have children, there's nothing for you. So you better go pop out an anchor baby. Yeah. Every time one of my clients has a child, I am so excited. I'm excited not just because there's a new human on this earth, but now I have an argument for why they get to stay. And you shouldn't have to procreate to live a free life. So at this point, we have a lot of people and a law that was written 70 years ago and no real solutions out there. So as long as our border remains open, which it should, in my opinion, be open to people fleeing, the only options are going to be humanitarian programs. And the humanitarian programs are overwhelmed. The very last slide I had up there was the last 4 months of data from the southern border. And in the last 4 months, between 2022 and 2023, 874,449 people were detained at the southern border by Customs and Border Patrol agents. It's actually broken down by unaccompanied children, single adults, families. 112,066 were detained within the United States at ICE field offices. So we're talking about 1 million people in 4 months, 1 million people who have families that depend on them, who have histories, who have something to contribute if they're allowed. Only a fraction of them have an actual legal path forward. And what's so heartbreaking about that is that there's a myth that there's not enough room. There's not enough space for all these people. We can't contain all these people. But the fact of the matter is we have always contained all these people. Nobody complained about not having enough room when we had a railroad that needed to be built, when we had plantations that needed to be staffed. Nobody complained about it when we had factories that needed to be filled. And now we have a healthcare crisis in which we need people to provide low-level, low-skilled healthcare. And guess who's doing it? Migrants. We have landscape jobs that need to be done. We have restaurants. We have hotels. We have schools that need bilingual assistance. We have space for all the people. What we don't have is a political and social will. So, when you hear somebody talking about they're not coming the right way, my family came the right way, they could just come legally. I hope you're armed now with a little more information about what it means to come legally, what it takes, and why it's simply not an option for most people, and why our current global crisis of violence and conflict is making it completely impossible to travel with a visa. If you ever want to talk about immigration, I'm usually here for lunch, and I love talking about immigration. But if you feel like you're motivated to do something, you can always write to your senator, your congressperson. There's some amazing programs out there that are supporting migrants, and they all need volunteers. So thank you for your time.